Connecting with Purpose is about doing what matters most in a time when our families, workplaces, and communities need us. This show from Purpose Views presents honest conversations about what's possible when we invest in helping our people be their best, purposeful selves. You'll hear the challenges of making those investments and tips for reaping their rewards. This show is designed to help people-first leaders like you create the impact you seek. Let me introduce you to the purpose-driven and real-talking hosts, Mark, Neil, and Nell.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. I am Nell Derek Debevoise, and we are here in the second season of Connecting with Purpose. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Yuisa Perez, who is the Chief People Officer at the Museum of Science in Boston, where I was a very lucky Girl Scout as a little girl and got to spend an overnight. So it has a deep place in my heart, as well as the globally renowned, really, mission of everything you do for kids and science and learning. But welcome, Yuisa. Thank you so much for being with me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's ecstatic. I love being able to talk about your big word there, the purpose. I think that is really, really exciting because it can get kind of lost sometimes. So I see these as great reminders and great connections to have with people. So thank you for thinking of me and bringing me out here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, folks can find you on LinkedIn and learn all of the nuances of your path thus far. We'll leave that to them. But tell us here, what is your individual purpose and how did that lead you to having this conversation with me?
I love that question of individual purpose. A lot of my work is talking about the mission and the purpose of what I do for work. So when I think about my individual purpose, it takes me to high school, and it takes me to a time that I remember feeling othered, and not liking that othered. And for some reason, I don't know. There's a calling, right? People talk about callings on a regular basis, and there was something in me where I felt I don't want anybody else to feel that way. Even in the fourth grade, even in the eighth grade, and then in high school. So I was I still am. So I'm Puerto Rican and but born and raised in Massachusetts with this connection to the beautiful island with my parents, and my parents live there today. My family is all over, but having a name, and my name is actually pronounced Juisa. The Y is with a J, and it's very common and it's fine. But it was really hard as a child when teachers would tell me in front of the whole class, your name should really just be Julie. If you're going to say Juisa, it's a Y, and then kids snickering and laughing and me not really understanding what that meant and what that does. So I felt othered. Cut to then high school. I remember being after school, my after school activities, and a group of students were making fun of another student who was in special ed, a subseparate, and I can't remember if he had Down syndrome or what he had, but he had something visible that was different than us. And I didn't know him. I didn't know the other students. I was enraged, and I just went over and I told everybody, in explicit languages, and using my high school vocabulary at that time to really go find something else to do. And people remembered that, and teachers remembered that, and I don't know where it came from. It's not, but I remembered I enjoyed that feeling. And that family, that boy went home and told the family, and that family then thanked me. They sought me out. Again, I was 16, 15 years old, maybe. And I just remember feeling that was great. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't realize. And from then on, my mission has just really been really wanting to help others. Life is really something about bigger than ourselves. So my purpose ended up being something bigger, whether it's in education to help students, whether it was in healthcare. And now here at such an iconic institution in Boston, I would love for people to come to the museum, but it's not about the museum for me. It's really about access to science in general. Our world is changing so fast. Who's being left out of that conversation? Who's being othered in science. And so my purpose is just inclusion and that sense of belonging wherever it is that anybody wants to go.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. And gosh, I'm so glad that we got to your proper name, Juisa, after we've had several conversations. And I just have made the error of assuming and not asking. So thank you so much for correcting me on that. And I'm actually so happy that it happened kind of on the record, because the name thing is such a powerful version of inclusion and like not daily, like hourly example, right, of how we feel it or not. And so I'm really, yeah, I'm glad that happened, and I'm able to, I'm sorry about that, to do that in live vision for people, because I think it's just one of those things that I made an assumption, oops, and I'm apologizing for that. And you're very graciously kind of sharing it, right? And I think it's important to know that we can all deal with those things and move on, and not have that be scary or problematic or whatever. So thank you for that unanticipated piece of kicking off here around inclusion. Really valuable, to say nothing of, yeah, making science accessible. I know you're doing so much on that, so I'm sure we'll get to it. Where we actually like to start with some of the more formal questions is by calling BS. It sounds like maybe some of that same high school language that you used in whatever form that is today. But where do you want to call BS on individual purpose and the way that companies particularly are engaging it or not, right? There's so much talk. It's sort of trendy, and yet, right? So tell me, what's a pet peeve or a thing that you see companies or leaders do that just doesn't work?
Oh gosh. Here's a great one. Companies talk about policies and companies talk about data, and they say, let's hire a chief of diversity, equity, inclusion, or let's hire a director of culture and belonging. Let's hire these people with no authority and no budget and put everything on their plate. The average, I heard, and I wish it's either Deloitte or McKinsey, wonderful organizations, that the average chief diversity officer now lasts 18 months in this role because this is a hard work. So here's the BS. The BS is you're creating these policies, you're creating these positions as a check mark. The true work is really taking everyone along in this journey and putting money towards that. Putting money towards how do we get everybody to understand their bias? And how is it that we can look at the news and we hear about sexual harassment on a daily basis or weekly basis or what have yous on the news? We hear about violence in the workplace regularly. And I'm not saying we want to believe in the hype and be afraid to walk outside, but racial profiling exists. Racism truly exists. Sexism happens on a regular basis. So why are we not trying to preempt that work and understand it within our organization? And why do you think that what happens outside doesn't happen in your organization? Why aren't we transparent to say it does happen? And this is how we deal with it when it does, instead of masking those things or even and not telling the employees what's going on. And in the different organizations that I've worked with, if it's private, public, or nonprofit, that is a similar theme where people say, well, that doesn't happen here, or we do our best to not let that happen here. Your best efforts. The world is the way the world is, and humans are extremely complex. And having humans be able to work with our authentic selves will help them and will help business, regardless of what business you are in. So I call BS on all of these positions that they're saying, well, we have a diversity, equity, inclusion person, we're fine, but that person is not at the table making these decisions and thinking about things at the forefront for whatever business, whether you're trying to sell shoes or whether you're trying to sell scarves or textbooks. All of those things are important to have that thought process from the beginning, not later. And there's a lot of BS on that. And I can say that carefully here too. The Museum of Science is 193 years young. You cannot tell me that in our organization that's beloved, that's cared for, We have a great endowment. People love coming here. Things happen, and we want to make it an even better place.
Yeah, beautiful. And I know you're working so hard on that and have outlasted that 18-month statistic. Thank goodness
Oh my
for all of
goodness,
us
yes.
and your
But it
team.
hit me. It hit me hard for sure. I said, now I understand what they mean.
So we'll get to some of that work that you are doing and ways that you can be mentor, inspiration to others. But just really draw the line here for me, because I get it and see it, but to really make it explicit between this inclusion, belonging, right? These efforts and individual purpose. What's the link for you? I mean, apart from it being your individual purpose, but how does that play out for your employees?
Oh, that's great to have that link. Um, and that's why when I made the distinction of it's about science, right? It's not about the museum, but you have to understand who you are to have your individual purpose. And I've been very fortunate in my life to somehow, I can't explain it, but I've always been drawn to purpose. So I'm not that leader that invents things. I'm more of that follower, that like second. Like I would never want to be CEO of something or president of something, but I love being the second in command and working together. So as my life has progressed to find my individual, what I loved was opportunities. So I went to a high school that had opportunities. I went to a high school that had an organization. This was, the early 90s, and AIDS was still continuing very much so. And there was a student AIDS action council. I didn't create it, but I was so thankful someone did, and I wanted to be a part of it. We were also new with our technology at the time, and we got computers, and I wanted to learn about computers. So I became part of the group that helped. We also developed a talk show. I just in theater, and I just really appreciated that helped me develop my sense of purpose. So all those skills of me honing in on my individual purpose, and it can change. We grow. That's what makes life exciting and interesting, is growing. I'm no longer into technology. I went way over my head, but I love the idea of innovation. I love the idea of thinking that something could be so amazingly great for the world, and having groups to think about it. So connecting that to then the individual and then the group purpose, and then understanding where we work. I see that the people who have the most secure individual purpose are the ones that are really going to lead our organization. And your individual purposes could be completely different. And for some reason, I get along and always have. When I was a teacher, I always got along with the math department. Don't know why. And they love their numbers. And here, I love working with the finance department. And I loved that connection. Their purpose are numbers. Their purpose is, let's make these numbers work. And I saw people, let's have these people understand their authentic selves. So having that individual purpose will really then guide you in having, and they can be different. They really can be different. It's a transferable skill that'll get you there.
Cool. I love that. I love that. We think of individual purpose discovery as such an unlock, right? And then pathway to inclusion, because you yourself can really understand how you show up and all the quirkiness of that, frankly, no matter what your demographics, right? Whether that's that you're a numbers geek, or that you go really deep for people or strategy or game-changing innovation, right? Whatever that thing is for you, it's so helpful to realize that you have that, because then it's obvious once you get that other people probably do too, right? And that allows for that kind of truly inclusive culture from a work point of view, right? It doesn't necessarily fix or address some of the demographic issues, which are also very real, and the bias, as you talked about. But I think it's an interesting starting point because it's so human, right? We all, if we look or think hard enough, we all have a purpose for being here.
Absolutely.
No. So let's dive into some of the work you've been doing in these more than 18 months in this role. Share with us something that you feel like you're doing really well, maybe to counter that BS that you see, for example.
Oh my goodness, there's so many great examples. I have so many failures here, and I have these failures are turning into some of these successes. My most proud moment here at the museum is that I talk about science. Maybe you think I know science. I was thinking to my friends, I don't even remember if I took science in high school, or if I did I pass it? I think, or I know it's important, and I know that science is important, right? I know healthcare is part of science, and I understand it. I understand the importance of it. I don't know how to do any of it. And when I first got here, it was very intimidating for me. I know my HR compliance, I know employment law, I know about diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. But how do I talk to people who have been working at the Museum of Science for 20 years? And they're talking about the new exhibit around climate change, energy, and I don't know that language. But what I do know is we've got to go into these communities and invite these communities to be part of the development of what it is that we have to do. So the talk came around of being competent, culturally competent, and a lot of BS around that too. Well, we're culturally competent. And I remember thinking, you took one workshop and all of a sudden you're competent. That does not make sense to me. So having this conversation with PhD candidates and scientists, and oh gosh, it goes on and on with the beautiful people that we have working here, and talking to them about it's not about competency, it's really about responsiveness. It's really about taking that cultural responsiveness and understand what communities are being left out because they don't see themselves here, whether it's in the marketing material or most importantly, we just started to put some of our exhibits in bilingual Spanish and English. And then when you're talking about Spanish and English too, there are 20 countries that speak Spanish. So it's really thinking about how are we gathering all of our communities in which we've been ignoring, and how do we bring them here so they can see themselves here? That is culturally responsive. So it was a proud moment where I was able to go on stage at a town hall here in front of 300 of our employees who I admire so much, and they do such great work here. And I was able to stand side by side our chief learning officer, who has been doing this work for such a long time, and we were both sharing our thoughts on culturally responsive practices and programming for the museum. And that was a really proud moment for me to talk about that. And I tell you this story because I oversee, as chief people officer, you typically oversee people operations, which is human resources. And that is about what happens internally. So Yuisa, tell us our recruitment process. Yuisa, help us with our affirmative action program. Yuisa, help design our compensation program. Absolutely. And we can do all that. And I'm happy to do all that. And I'm very skilled at doing all that. But you can't forget about the outside. Because if we want to diversify the workforce, I do not believe in goals. I mean, I know that sounds funny. I believe in what's right. So I believe in, yes, we want to create an organization where people want to work, where people belong, feel belong, regardless of your background. So if we're ignoring that, let's see what kind of jobs we can have here. So we started asking for people to be bilingual in Spanish and in English. And just because you're bilingual in Spanish and English doesn't mean that you're then going to be Latino. You can be bilingual because you're learning being bilingual, and that is great. We want you here, but that is accessibility. You're able to speak more than one language. You're getting a whole nother community to come here. So when we're talking about some of the things that I've been working on, I'm working on that inside out. We want to create space inside. And when you're talking about culturally responsive programming on the inside, the outside, think about who's going to apply for these jobs. People who want to be part of the community. And that is going to create a rich community that's going to be inclusive, authentic, and people will have that sense of belonging.
Totally. It's such a good illustration of, we'd love to talk about the win-win-wins that comes from this work, right? Because I think because it is hard work. I know that. I know that from you. I know that from other partners. I know that from my own journey. And it has incredible reward, right? It unlocks all these opportunities when you're, this challenge or this effort of going bilingual. Oh, geez, that's expensive. That's hard. but it also is this like incredible talent magnet for all these people that you hadn't been
Yes.
able to hire before, right? It's this professional development opportunity for that person who isn't Latino, but does want to learn or know a lot of Spanish and can shadow that, whatever that there's, but it's just a beautiful example of that kind of win-win-win that, yes, it's hard work and it uncovers these gems. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I love that you use the word unlock. You know what, our president says a lot here that, and I do conversations and I get asked to speak at different places as well. And I love representing the museum because Tim Ritchie is our president. And what he has taught me was we're working towards giving permission for people to give themselves permission to think differently. Kind of like you're unlocking, right? So people, whether you work someplace for 6 months or you work someplace for 20 years, you end up sometimes, generally speaking, this is what my job is. This is what I signed up for. So I'm going to do my 9 things because that's what it says in my job description. But he is helping all of us, his entire leadership team, to really think about give your staff permission to do things differently. And I love that. It's like where you unlock this in everybody, unlock it. And people are coming in with their own experiences, whether how they were treated. So me coming in, I have my own past of how I'm coming in. So sometimes when I see a group of people and I'm thinking, oh gosh, I would love to scream and yell at them because they just said something highly offensive, but I'm not. I've learned differently. So now let's think about a way in which we can unlock what it is that we're really saying. Unlock your bias, unlock your creativity, unlock your outside thinking so we can progress instead of moving things forward where they shouldn't be. It's such a gift to be working in an organization that allows that. And you really do have to seek it. When we're talking about women and you're talking about the workforce, it's really about seeking a place that's going to appreciate you just as much as you want to be there, whether it's the money or not, whether it's the status or not of a title. An organization that can embrace that is really important.
Yeah. And permission is beautiful. We talk about that. That was kind of part of my motivation for writing the book I wrote, honestly, was giving permission on them. And then purpose fused as well. We talk a lot about me, we, and world levels. And there's permission at all those levels. It's permission to me to not just yell or, have justice for that person. It's permission that we to lead differently, to think differently, to collaborate differently, right? And then as the world, to be an organization that moves differently. And that's, in your case, right, that's to be a nonprofit that thinks really entrepreneurially and with a, profit model that supports the work, not just the donations and the endowment. So yeah, I think that permission is so empowering to have from a leader, and to really run with, because we are doing things differently than we have for 193 years or however long people's organizations have been around, right? It's a brand new world in really promising ways. But it's not, we've learned to be locked and to be safe. Absolutely. Right. And so there's permission to do that unlock.
Absolutely. See, there's another key word is safety. Yeah. In human resources, again, regardless of where you are, human resources, we have almost that inside. I see the difference of a man walking into my office versus a woman walking into my office discussing compensation. I see the difference of someone who feels as though they're being discriminated against their age. I hear how managers talk and how our leaders talk. Intention versus impact. I don't believe there's a bad intention in a lot of people. And most people, there is no bad intention. But the impact sometimes is pretty sad, horrific, and challenging.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, just to bring back our very mundane example, because I think it's helpful for people to hear and see that, like, I had no intent to offend or to add to that othering that you grew up with. And yet I said your name totally wrong. Like, we're doing an interview. How would I not just ask, in a casual conversation, even the first time we met, am I saying Yuisa correctly? Nope. Juisa. Okay, great. Not hard, so it's just so real. We have to, I think that intent versus impact is so important to remember. And it doesn't make any of us bad people or less worthy, but it's just, we have to own that. So yeah. I know we talked a little bit in past conversations, but my next question is kind of the growing edge, right? Knowing that this is a lifelong journey. Again, me, we, we're all right. We're all kind of in it. And so say a little bit, what's kind of your next horizon with the work you're doing at Museum of Science around making that HR function really inclusive, inside out, outside in? Where are you headed next?
Um, oh gosh, I just got a rush of so many ideas because we are launching on so many things.
Mm,
My next step is really understanding the community in which we want to serve.
mm,
Mm, We are we are a C-suite of 8 people, but our president calls us E8 because E stands for ensemble, and we are an ensemble of leaders, which I truly appreciate.
mm,
And internally, we call ourselves E8, but if I just said E8 across the board, people wouldn't know what that was. So um, we are intentionally looking at the belonging piece,
mm,
intentionally looking at the community piece. We are embarking on public science learning like they've never done before, science at the pace of change. The museum being as iconic, I had recently learned that sometimes it would take 5 years to create an exhibit. There's the research involved, there's the there's the fundraising involved, and then the marketing. So it takes that long
mm,
sometimes. We were when COVID hit, we were able to put together in 8 months our project vaccine. So our president, our leadership, okay, if we could do this in 8 months, we're going to do it in 6 months. And if we can do it in 6 months, we're going to go at the pace of change of science. And again, I love it all. Those are things, conversations that are above my understanding sometimes. But what ends up happening is we start thinking about community and we
mm,
start thinking about who's around us. And so, how do we get them involved as we're creating
mm,
these exhibits? And we're embarking also on digital and
mm,
making sure that we're in classrooms, that we're online, and that we're, of course, in our brick and mortar museum. But
mm,
how are we making all of those connections? We used to give passes all the time. We used to go places, here's 100 passes for your youth center to come. What does that mean? So
mm,
you're going to come once, you're going to see, and you're going to leave. But how are you participating in science? How do you
mm,
feel like you're an active participant in science if you're just coming on a field trip one time with your
mhm.
school?
Yeah.
I see the museum doing great things that could be modeled in any organization. Um, that could be really about looking at co-creation,
Mm,
collaboration, and
mm,
partnerships, and redefining that for us is
yeah.
really, really important. So we have an internal team of about 20 of our staff members and that are really looking at just that. Do we have a
Mm,
community council where we have community members help with all aspects of the museum? Do we
mm,
not? I mean, there's just so many aspects, but it is exciting. And I get to work with a gentleman, James Monroe, who is been working here, I think 7 or 8 years. I could be wrong there, but longer than I have been here. And he executive produces all of our adult programming. And he has found a way, prior to me, and been very, very highly successful. But what we're doing is seeing what he's doing and how he's been able to do co-creation
mm,
with communities at large that have been ignored all around mental health, meditation, poetry, readings, and the science of all of that goes together. And it has been a joy to work with him. So him and I are both co-leading this group of 20 staff members to really, really, truly think about how we're going to effectively reach out the community. Not just it's a
mm.
nice to have, it's a must have.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I can imagine many, but I won't try to do that. I'll ask you directly, how does that link to those people's individual purpose? Like, how is that pulling James or that community? How are their purposes showing up in that work?
I love that question. Started we started meeting probably, okay, I'm really off with it. Let's say started meeting 3 months ago. And in meeting 3 months ago, we have added what we call a threshold moment, where we're all coming from different departments. Someone maybe just missed a deadline on finance. someone maybe did really great on their next exhibit. And so they're coming in all hyped and excited. And so we all have to meet together to then talk about something challenging, where we all might have different opinions on it. And we kind of just come in, get together, and we'll do a 2-minute threshold so that we can get back into the work. And when we're in this threshold, one of my thresholds was simply, what's your favorite ice cream? Something that people are like, oh, I hate icebreakers. But if you're putting it in, and I'm the one who loves the icebreakers, right? But you're putting it into a context of a threshold moment. Let's just take a breather. Let's relax. Here we are. And not one person, there was 20 people on the call, not one person said vanilla or strawberry. They were all saying all these amazing things. And so we just got excited about ice cream. And then we started saying, well, this is where you can get these ice cream places. So their authentic selves were shining. No, that's something small, but it was able to really help them do the work. They had a little bit more relaxed in their chair a little bit. They could really have these then challenging conversations of, what does this mean for my job? I don't know if I can actually do this. Do I have decision-making authority? Teresa, you're asking us a lot, but I'm not ever going to have the opportunity of going out to the community, or what does that mean for me? So having that threshold moment to say, it does relate to you, but it's going to be work to figure out how. But as people can come in and feel as though they're authentic selves, and giving them the space to do so. It is my plan that people will then show up with their purpose.
Totally. No, I think that's an awesome example, because it is really approachable, right? And not like big and scary about unwinding racism, or, these like dealing with neurological differences, which are so important, and like really a little next level. If you don't have that ability to sit back and joke about mint chocolate chip versus Rocky Road versus Moose Tracks blueberry from Maine, or whatever.
I haven't heard half of those.
Ice cream pro.
That is such a good point. I wanted to then share with you too that we have an exhibit. Again, I don't know how long this exhibit has been at the Museum of Science, but it's the Hall of Human Life. And you would get in and you would come in, you'd get this wristband. And this wristband would tell you about what you're eating, and you would go to different aspects of how you walk, and would check your walk. And the entire exhibit is an amazing exhibit, but you can only choose male or female. We're in a different world now. We can't it's going to cost, oh gosh, a lot of money. Again, I don't know how much. It's going to cost a lot of money. People's feelings and livelihood has been on this exhibit. And it's not just as simple as saying, well, add non-binary, add other. It just, we want to do things really well. So having those conversations, people's feelings really shine through and come in about how to make those changes. What is it that, do we need it at all? Do we need to ask that question at all? We had machines on there. Do we disassemble the machines? The questions, and we have donors. And when people give you millions of dollars, the expectation is something is one way. So there are super complex, but we're tackling it. We're tackling it.
Love it. Well, so much more that we could go to, but I'll wrap with my last question, which is just back to you, Yuisa, the individual. What would you like to leave behind, whether that's in this role or whether that's in many decades at the end of a long career in life? Is there a word or a sense or an outcome that you would like to leave as your legacy?
My laugh. Contagious a lot of times. When I go out salsa dancing, I'm the worst. I have 2 left feet. I have no rhythm. I love to dance, and it makes me laugh. And a lot of people, when we go out with my friends, they say, but you always get asked to dance. It's so much fun. I said, that's because all I do is smile, because I'll step on your toe, you'll step on my toe, and I'm just smiling. I think it's great. I don't get a lot of repeat because we were like, oh, that was fun, but I really want to go dance instead of falling over you. I love that I'm able to see the positive in regardless. I've been through, as I mentioned to you, I've been through, going through divorce. My daughter suffers from anxiety, and we just been through a lot as a family and moving to a new city, and we're trying to find great restaurants. So my son and I said, okay, great. We don't know where we're going, what we're doing. Let's find the best burger place. Okay. So we tested all the burgers every Friday night. Make the best of it. And that's what I want my legacy to be. And to the serious stuff too, right? Racism is serious. I remember being spit at. I remember asking if I belonged here. And I remember like to that point of being other. And I remember the pain that it really did hurt. I remember wondering, did I not get that job because my name is Yuisa Perez? Do I change my name? Those are some heavy hitters sometimes for us. And I also know what it is to blend, quote unquote. I also know that I could walk around this world as a white woman with a name like Julia or Julia, beautiful name, but not mine. I could walk around like that. So, but regardless of how serious it is, I want to be remembered, and the legacy that I want to leave is looking for that positive light in everything, and so that we can make those changes together and moving forward, personally and professionally. I think is so. So remember my laugh. Remember my smile and wanting to dance salsa regardless. Really what that would be great.
It was so good. Such a memorable way to be remembered. I think we can deliver on that. Well, really, really thank you. Thank you for the openness and candor and the incredible work you're doing, and your own purpose activation, as well as all the ways that you're rippling it out to your people. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for this time. It was wonderful.
So good. Thanks, Yuisa. Thank you. Take care.
Okay.
We're energized about this journey and hope you choose to join us. Click the subscribe button now so you don't miss out on all the actionable wisdom to come.